Hello everyone, I'm Grandmaster Denes Boros, and today I'm going to revisit the ideas in the Rapport-Jobava system. There were quite a few developments, and I do want to address some of the issues that the whole knight c3 bishop f4 variation was facing. The main line will be from the game played by Mark Hebden and Ranesh Ratnesan, but I do want to address other parts of the position. So bishop f4 is the main move here. This is the system. And c5 is the main line. However, a6 and e6 is just as popular. In fact, a6 is one of the better moves where e3, e6 can transpose to the other one. So let's talk about this one for a second. So a6 is usually played to avoid ideas of knight b5 threatening to attack that pawn. Whenever e6 is played, black is planning to go bishop b4. Therefore, some of the players decided to ignore it earlier on, but it turned out to be very uncomfortable with plans of c5 and knight d7, even attacking this bishop on d3. So I kind of came up with this idea of playing a3 instead, making sure that never really happens. Bishop d6, knight f3. Now, black has the option of taking, but then there's e takes f4, and white has an open file. Black is still closed in, and there's a very nice outpost on e5. So instead, they usually play c5. D takes c5, bishop takes c5. And even though black's been losing some tempi, black has a solid structure, or so they think. However, white has his plans of his own. He's planning to play e4 as soon as possible. Knight c6, castles, castles, queen e2. This is one of my favorite plans. Your knight actually not only attacks that d5 pawn, but also prepares this e4, e5 break, or even e takes d5 just to create a pawn weakness. Bishop e7, e4. D takes c4, knight takes c4. On a side note, d4, white can just go knight a2 or even knight b1. Knight a2, by the way, was played in a similar position between Rapport and Rajabov. However, knight b1 makes sense as well. You want to reroute the knight, and this is sort of a better version as white has firm control over the e5 square. That means white will be able to push on with e4, e5 in the upcoming future. However, in one of my games, my opponent fell for a simple trick, but it's worth a look. D takes c4, knight takes c4. In fact, we get into a French type of structure where the bishop on c8 is quite bad and the queen is passive. Meanwhile, this bishop is controlling the all-important c7 square. So here my opponent, in a worse position, played this b5 move, but that actually runs into this quite cute tactical trick of queen e4, double attacking as attacking mate on h7 and the knight on c6. There is no way of defending both. Now this is kind of the way how easily you can win in the Rapport-Jobava system. And in fact, that's why I kind of like this new idea of playing with a3, which actually I played quite a lot of times these days. But back to this main idea there. a6, e3, e6. Bishop d3 is not as good, so we talked about a3. c5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop d3, bishop e7, d takes c5, bishop takes c5, castles, castles. And here I actually had another idea, which I played a lot these days, and instead of queen e2, playing bishop g5. Now this seems like stuttering with the bishop, but actually it has a point. I'm stopping black from playing e5. e5 would actually run into bishop takes f6, g takes, and knight takes d5. Very nice little tactical trick. There's no queen takes d5 because bishop h7 and the queen is lost. However, black can go h6, bishop h4, queen e7, queen e2, and I still have the same idea of e4, e5, and black is sort of stuck dealing with these threats. This is another way of playing. Okay, back to the other one that I wanted to show. Instead of a6, there is the immediate e6, And here I have this idea of a3 yet again, wanting to achieve the same thing. If e3, then there's bishop b4, and in fact, black didn't even waste time playing a6 in this case. But even here, still, I like my idea of playing a3 and bishop g5. Again, this stutter, but remember, I actually have a little bit more flexibility here. I haven't pushed my pawn yet. For example, if black ignores me, plays knight d7, knight f3, c5, I am not forced to play e3. I can play e4 in one go. C takes d4, knight takes d4, and after d takes e4, I immediately have knight takes e6 with a very good position. After f takes, queen takes d6, I had a beautiful position, one of my online games. So therefore, black should be avoiding that. Plays h6, bishop h4, castles. Now I can still go e4, but I prefer e3, c5, knight f3, knight c6, dc, bishop takes c5, bishop d3, queen e7, queen e2. Now, notice that in the case of a6 castles, my king was already short castled, so in safety. However, here I will have some extra options. Queen e2, g5. g5 seems like a logical move, because after bishop g3, there's e5. However, black's pieces are so awkwardly placed. I have this very nice sacrifice of taking on g5, takes. And here, the big question is, obviously, knight e5, as king g7 surprisingly loses on the spot to bishop f6, and queen f6, there's this check, king h8, check here, and it's mate. So black is forced to take with the king, but here there's this very nice little move of checking. If king e5, it's mate on the board, and if king g7, check, and the king again gets mated on h7. So instead here, knight e5 is the critical idea. But then white has this very nice move of rook d1, preparing to get the rook in via rook d1, rook d3, rook g3, sort of doing a rook lift, rook d8, f4. Not only chasing away the knight, but preparing this e4, e5 break, which is kind of the principal idea. Knight g4, attacking here, but here white has this very nice move of b4, hitting this bishop. Bishop takes e3. Now, if black goes bishop b6, this queen would be undefended, and all sorts of queen g4, knight takes g4, bishop takes e7 ideas work. Black is sort of forced to take. h3, bishop f2 check, king f1, bishop d4, h takes, bishop takes g3. And even though black is up a piece, there's a big attack brewing. Queen f8 and queen f8, even though very logical, after queen h2 there would be queen g7, runs into this beautiful sacrifice of rook h8 check, king takes, bishop takes f6, king here, queen h2, and there is no defense against mate on h7 and h8. So that kind of shows that this variation is very, very promising of postponing castling, going queen e2, and preparing the attack with rook d1 and e4. So these are the first developments that I wanted to show. This a3 bishop g5 concept, bishop g5 predominantly being played by me, although a3 has been seen before. But the new development is in this game between Hebden and Ratnekaran, that is. So let's take a look at that one. e3, takes, this is the main line. Obviously a6 has to be played. Knight c6 runs into knight b5, and black actually loses on the spot on move 5, which is not quite a nice feeling. So everybody plays a6, and originally everybody played knight f3, bishop g4, h3, takes, and this has been the game played between Rapport and versus Sutovsky in the Chess Olympiad, which was famously won by Richard Rapport. But instead, Hebden opts for bishop d3, sort of avoiding this spin with bishop g4. Knight c6, knight e2, g6. And g6, in fact, is a little bit double-edged, as white always has this idea of going for this hook with queen d2, bishop h6, as happens in the game. Queen d2, bishop g7, bishop h6, castles, h4. And I really like this straightforward play by Mark Hebden, who actually been a big proponent of these bishop f4, knight c3 systems. And in this case, he's actually going for a quick attack immediately, not even castling. e5, a very good move by Ratnesan, trying to counter a side attack in the center. Bishop takes, takes, d takes, knight takes, long castles. In fact, this position, however, is still very much in favor of white. This pawn on d5 is just too weak, not to mention the fact that white has a ready-made attack on the h-file. b5, knight d4. Very good grandmaster move by Mark Hebden, centralizing the knight and blocking this pawn on d4. b4, knight c2, a5, f3. Preparing the typical dragon and slash English attack. Knight c4, queen f4. Again, look at these moves. He's making sure that all of his pieces are centralized. Queen b6, and now here comes the hammer blow, h5, opening it up for the rook, as all of his pieces are lurking around this king on g7. Not to mention, this rook also has some threats on the d5 pawn. Rook a7, and even though it seems fairly safe at the moment, Mark Hebden notices the big and main idea, that is, to checkmate the king. King g8, takes, knight c6. Probably one of the most brilliant moves in this game, realizing that once this queen is not defending this knight, queen f6, queen g7 is just plain and simple checkmate. Knight a7 is coming. This is a very, very strong move. Takes, rook d6, and now black is facing an unpleasant choice. Either has to part with the queen, or queen takes f6 follows. Now that was avoided because it would be mate on g7 next move. So queen takes d6 happens, takes, rook a6, queen d4, but this is a matter of technique for Mark Hebden. Knight f4, bishop b7, takes, rook d6, rook d1, takes, king takes d1, and black resigned. Quite a nice game and an interesting concept by Mark Hebden, and I really hope this will reignite the love for the Rapport-Jobava system. And if you have any questions, thoughts, please write messages and comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.